G'day fellas, and welcome to another Age of Empires 4 video on the new DLC. Today we're going to be theory crafting about the Knights Templar. It's going to be more of a slow-paced video. We're going to be looking to focus on what we can try and put together with this civilization at an early stage. Just keeping in mind that the meta is probably going to evolve pretty quickly, but just sort of, things that we can put together at a base level. So the first thing I want to talk about is just sort of the pilgrimage, the functionality of it, and the importance of it with regard to your economy. So each villager that you've got is going to generate a set amount of resources every minute throughout the game. As an example, if you're on sheep, you're going to be collecting around 40 food per minute when you're doing that. And if we were to compare that to how much you can actually bring in with a pilgrim, they cap at about 130 gold. So that means that this sacred site out here, you're looking at about 130 gold, whereas a sacred site that's going to be closer to you is going to reward you with less gold. The floor for the amount of gold that you receive is 65, so it's always going to be more than that. But generally, you're going to try and optimize towards the furthest sacred site just so that you can guarantee the highest amount of gold. And keep in mind that that is generating every minute. So it doesn't really matter that it's further. It's not going to need to do a return trip like a trader would. It just gets there and it just evaporates the pilgrim and then you get the gold. So you're still going to be increasing or improving the amount of gold that you're generating. So you're going to want to optimize that as much as you can. Now, there's a number of different ways that we can actually go about getting pilgrims. And there's no more efficient way than the first pilgrim right here. So it's going to cost us 300 resources. It takes 10 seconds. It's available in Feudal Age. So we'll go ahead and we'll throw in our cheat in a jiffy and we'll age up. We don't really care too much about who we age up with, but we'll go ahead and we'll select this sacred site. We know this is going to be 130. So let's go ahead and do safe passage. And indeed, it is 130 gold. So that is now 130 gold per minute that is coming into the game. Now, it's going to take probably a little bit longer than a minute to actually get out there, but once it gets out there, once it connects, it's 130 gold that's coming through. So this is the equivalent right here of about 3 villages. So if we lose this, we're losing quite a bit. Now, of course, that's only 3 villages at a temporary level. It's only 3 villages for a minute. So it's not like it's going to be a permanent loss, but it is going to be a significant loss, and we do want to avoid losing them where possible. So I think as a general rule, you're going to want to unlock pilgrims very early on as the Knights Templar, and you're also going to want to defend them. Now, when it comes to doing a run like this, obviously this is a big run, and you're not going to be easily able to get walls up here to defend them. You're going to need to rely on units. So we'll talk more about units as we get further on into this video, but I just want to try and really hammer home pilgrims before we move on. So I'm going to send a villager out over towards that sacred site because we're going to need that in a little bit. But our next upgrade that we've got is called Sanctuary, and that's a little bit more expensive, an extra 100 food, an extra 50 wood, and that's going to give you access to a second pilgrim. And that means that now every minute, instead of 1 pilgrim spawning, there is going to be a second pilgrim. So we're essentially doubling the amount of gold that we're getting, and this goes from being, the equivalent of more than 3 villages per minute that's coming through. It's now 6 villages. The equivalent of 6 villas is pretty significant. If you were playing as the new English variant civilization, that would be the equivalent of having 2 manors. So it is quite a lot of resources, and we can see right there that it disappeared. So I think it's definitely worthwhile to look to try and get these early upgrades, ideally as soon as you can justify it. And that's going to be on the condition that you are able to defend your pilgrims, because the pilgrims are obviously slow, they're weak, but I think that's going to be core. Now, I've actually got a build order that I'll be posting up on the channel once the game actually releases, because obviously you guys don't really care about build orders right now. When this video goes up, you're not going to have your hot little hands on the game just yet. We can see there's the 2 pilgrims that are coming through right here, and obviously, so we're not going to post the build order just yet, but basically, I think what's going to be the meta here is that we're going to want to rush pilgrims, because we can actually get these guys out very quickly. In fact, we can go for an incredibly fast age up and get our pilgrims, our second pilgrim set, immediately, and that's going to allow us to, on the second spawn of pilgrims, so the first one happens, and on the second spawn, you can get in your second pilgrim. So the other way that you can now begin to push that pilgrim number up is going to be through your fortress. So the fortress is the unique building. It's an expensive building. It's not a cheap building, and it doesn't really offer you a lot of versatility other than just being a big keep that is good at defending. And when we go ahead and when we put that down, it's obviously going to provide us a huge amount of defense. But I think from a general perspective, you're going to want to be defending your pilgrims throughout the duration of their pilgrimage. You're not going to want to just be defending them at the end or just be defending them at the beginning. And there's different ways that you can do that. Obviously, you can play aggressive, you can play defensive, you can just look to escort them out over and over and over again. So you can see, like, as an example, maybe if you've you've got walls up over here, then you could kind of leave these pilgrims and then double back over towards this position. But your enemy has got an opportunity to hit these pilgrims at multiple times throughout their journey, and we're obviously going to want to try and make sure that they get to their destination. So we'll go ahead and we'll drop that fortress down. So when we do that in the feudal age, there's a couple of different bonuses that we're going to be getting from this. So we'll also drop in our racks, we'll drop in an archery range as well out here, just so that we can get our units. So we'll go for the Knights Hospitaller. We'll also grab a couple of archers here. Let's throw down a couple of houses back at home. And if we were to think about our units, so all of our units are now receiving bonuses. So if we take a look at the archers, they're getting a bonus to their range. If we have a look at the base range that they've got a base of 5 range, so 5 tiles of range, and now within the radius of the fortress, they'll be providing a buff which increases that range by 15%, so up to 5.75, which is a decent amount. But on top of that, you've also got access to the unique upgrade, Desert Citadels, which increases your armor by 1 and 1. And that's a pretty good, that's a good amount of armor. So let's go ahead, we'll grab our armory and just talk about our base level, because I think there's definitely going to be an element or a question about, do I actually add in a fortress in the feudal age, or do I just wait for the castle age to start thinking about adding those in? Because when we're considering this question, there's 2 components to it. There's a defensive component, and then there's an economic component. We're increasing the amount of gold that we're generating each minute by doing this, the equivalent of 3 villages, and we're also helping defend these, making sure that they get to their target. And that in itself is an economic bonus, because more villages or more pilgrims that get there, then obviously the more gold that you're going to be generating. So that's a good thing. But in addition to that armor that we're talking about, obviously you've got your base level of armor. You can go ahead and grab Desert Citadels, and that's going to further push that up. And it's got quite the radius on it as well. Which means that you're definitely more focused on being a defensive civilization, wanting to try and fight around your fortresses where possible, and obviously until you get to the point where you need to be aggressive and try and win the game. I think that's definitely going to be a huge component. So let's rewind a little bit here. We're going to head back to the start. Now that we've kind of, at least at this point, I would say that we've very much sorted out, at least in my mind, we've sorted out what we want to do with pilgrims. We want to try and unlock our 2nd level technology as quickly as we can. So let's just go into the tech tree and have a look there. So we want to go in and we want to unlock Safe Passage and Sanctuary as quickly as we can, but we also want to do so responsibly. So making sure that we wouldn't go for a very quick Sanctuary if we're getting attacked with men-at-arms, okay? Or, you're getting spear rushed in the Dark Age or something like that. Or, you're up against the French and they've aged up at 3 minutes and 46 seconds, and you know that there's going to be a knight coming to you very, very soon. Then it wouldn't really make sense to get Sanctuary. We want to do so responsibly. So that's going to be a key component to it. It's going to be matchup dependent. And then finally, of course, when it comes to the fortress itself, I don't think it's going to be viable to get that in the feudal age, mainly because once you get to the castle age, which I guess we should probably just touch on before we restart and before we reset, but once you get to the castle age, you'll unlock a new technology, and that's going to allow you to increase the amount of gold that you're getting from your pilgrims. So now all of a sudden you become more incentivized to do that. If we think about our pilgrims at the moment, we're only meant to be, we should only have 2 at the moment, okay? So just let's imagine that there's only 2, and all of a sudden we age up. Nothing here changes with regard to, we could also go for the Republic of Genoa, but just for the sake of this, we'll go with the heavy spears instead. So we get 2 pilgrims that come out, but now what we can do is by putting down that very first keep, or that very first fortress, not only are we now going to be getting the extra pilgrim, which is absolutely lovely, but we now have the ability to get treasure towers as well, which is going to increase that even further by 20%. And on top of this treasure towers bonus increases the amount of gold that you're generating from sacred sites. It generates the amount of gold that you're collecting from relics. So if we go ahead and grab our monastery in here and we start capturing this and we go grab that relic, so now we're not only getting that extra pilgrim, we're also starting to buff up our gold generation. So here, as an example, this relic is now gathering more gold. We're getting more gold from here. So I think it's definitely going to make sense to go into that first fortress as a almost standard thing to do once you're in the castle age. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be something that you rush, because I do think, I do appreciate it's quite expensive as well, but I suspect that the meta will probably look to see players aligning themselves with, going castle and then getting the fortress up immediately, just looking to try and take advantage of this, because you are going to want to put a monastery down, you are going to want to control sacred sites, you are going to want to get that extra bonus gold that comes through. So now that we've sort of talked about the pilgrimage functionality, the way that it's probably going to be buffed up, or the way that it's probably going to be played around. Let's talk a little bit about some of the combos that we can use when it comes. So you can see we're getting 156 gold now coming through. Let's talk about some of the combos that I think are going to be quite prevalent, or at least some of the strengths that I think are going to come through. Because in the previous video where we looked at the tech tree, we didn't really talk too much about strengths or about theory crafting. So let's talk a little bit about that and sort of like where I envision the direction of the game to go. So if we start off just on base numbers at the moment, I really feel like Kingdom of France is actually quite strong. And it's not because of the unit, but rather the playstyle the unit enables. So as an example, like the Hospitaller Knight is great at healing. It makes sense to have that, right? Like if we go up with the Hospitaller Knights, we're going to have our pilgrims that are marching out towards the sacred site. If they take any damage, we can heal them up. Wonderful. But realistically, when it comes to the Kingdom of France, the reason why they're quite good is because it allows you to put the enemy on the back foot. It allows you to have these chevaliers out, and that they're pseudo knights basically, half knight, half horseman. They're quite tanky. They don't do a whole bunch of damage, but they're good. They're good to have. And if we don't go for this option, all we're left with are horsemen. And we want to try and have units that are mobile because we're going to need to defend our pilgrims. I think that's incredibly important. Now, there's absolutely an argument if you've got a trade route or a pilgrimage route that is not as efficient as this. So here, as an example, we've once again got this really nice route. But let's say you've got this one over here where your pilgrims are spawning a little less. It's not that they're spawning less frequent, it's that there's no crossover between spawns. So as an example, if we were to get our pilgrims out here, then they will still be walking when the next ones spawn, and subsequently they can be picked off. So if you've got that, then it becomes more important for you to have cavalry, whereas if you've got a closer spawn like this, then you can kind of justify going into infantry. At least that's one of the ways that I see it. So when it comes to combinations, one of the cool bonuses that I like so far is this guy right here. So we're going to start off with the Sergeant. So we've got Inner Jiffy on already. So if we take a look at the way that he works, so it is a ranged melee unit. And if we think about it from the perspective, okay, what does it do well against? What does it fail against? It does well against horsemen. It does well against spearmen. It does relatively well against, say, a knight. It's probably going to have a little bit more trouble against a knight because the knight's got a lot of damage. But horsemen, spearmen, that sort of thing. So my theory crafting with this is that you're probably going to see a nice little combo that comes out, which is going to be horsemen together with the sergeant. And the reason why is because the horsemen are going to deal very effectively with any of the archers, and then the sergeants are going to be able to pick off any of the spears, and any of the horsemen that the enemy's got are not going to be able to really do that much damage. Even though technically it is a ranged unit, I don't know if they actually get the bonus damage against it, because you can see it's 9 ranged, whereas these are heavy melee infantry. So I would suspect it probably doesn't get the bonus damage. And on top of that, it's also got the armor. So if you've got 4 armor and your enemy's got 9 damage, they're only doing 5 damage to you each time. So you're going to be very tanky against horsemen. Spears are going to be exactly the same. If you take a look at the damage that a spear is doing, we'll harden, upgrade. So we're getting that +1 because of the Antioch bonus, so we're not considering that. So it's got a base of 8, which means you're only doing 50% of your damage to the sergeant. So they're a very effective unit at dealing with horsemen with spear, and then they're going to be focusing down those units, while the horsemen are going to be focusing down the archers on the back line. Now, of course, when it comes to the knight is going to be a little bit more difficult to justify doing this combo against, just mainly because the knight is going to kill both of these units. So that could be troublesome. But let's talk a little bit about, okay, you've taken the sergeant in the or you've taken the this age up, this commandery. Let's see if we can recognize it. Antioch. Well, you've taken Antioch in the feudal age. Where do you go in the castle age? Well, obviously, when it comes to the castle age, you don't have to pick a specific one. There are 3 options for you, and you should just feel free and reactive to be able to choose which one you want. But naturally, it would make sense if you've already got a 10% bonus to melee units, you would want to double down on that. You would want to go for more melee units. So we could look to go into the Angevin Empire, which is going to give us a little bit of an increase in health on fortresses and docks health, but gives us that heavy spearman. So we'll go ahead and we'll grab that, and we'll get the heavy spearman out. And how does it combo with the unique unit of the Antioch? Or is it the Principality of Antioch? I think it is. I think it does okay. The only issue is they kind of do, it's not that they do the same thing, it's just that they are a little bit weak to ranged units, right? Like, at the end of the day, their heavy spearman's going to get countered by crossbows, the sergeant is going to get countered by archers, and that is a problem. So you don't really have an answer for ranged units if you do that. So there is definitely an argument that you instead look to go into the Genitua. Now, obviously, it's kind of hard for us to step back here, so we'll go back and do this. Now, another thing to note, I'm not going to be talking so much about combos in the Imperial Age, just because I think every single one of these is very good, very viable. And in fact, I will just say right now, I think every single commandery, they've done a really good job of this. You know, normally when it was like, I remember when Age of Empires 4 initially came out and everyone's like, okay, Abbey of Kings for the English versus the Council Hall, like how, this isn't even a decision. Like, obviously I'm going for the, no, I'm just kidding. We're going for the Council Hall. You get the idea, right? Like everything is viable here. And I think I really do like that a lot, where there's no clear pathway. I will say, if anything, the clearest pathway though is the Kingdom of France, just for the fact that you get the Chevalier. So if we take a look at the Chevalier, and let's go ahead and we'll just start rallying out towards here. We'll grab our Pilgrim, so our first one comes out. So by having the Chevalier, I don't know why I put an R in there. Does it have an R? No, it's just Chevalier. It's not Chevrolet. It's not Chevrolet. Chevalier. It's Chevalier. By having the Chevalier, now you're able to move over towards the enemy side of the map. But at the same time, so when you're doing that, you're going to be pulling the enemy away from your Pilgrim. But at the same time, you're going to be mobile and able to defend out here. So I think this is going to be quite a strong, like starting point essentially for you playing as the or playing as the Knights Templar. It's going to make a lot of sense. When it comes into pairing this with a unit in the Castle Age, I don't think there's a particularly strong pairing that you could do here. Typically, like any one of these is going to be absolutely fine. It's not that there's really a synergy that we're looking for here. I don't think that there's really a synergy to find, and it's more just going to be based on circumstances, right? Like if you're playing up against an English player, then going into the Genitua is going to make a lot of sense because it counters ranged units. Whereas if you're playing against a Holy Roman Empire player, maybe going into the Genoese crossbowmen is going to make a little bit more sense. Whereas if you're just playing any random civilization and you like the idea of making a single unit that's just going to run everything down, then the heavy spearman could be the choice for you. And I suspect I'm probably going to be playing into these two a little bit more with these. Now, of course, we can also talk about the bonuses of these age ups, but we'll do that a little bit later on in the video. Main point here is just to sort of theory craft about combinations that you can get, and realistically, I think for the Chevalier, you could look to try and play this as an example into like a cavalry compo. So basically, you start with the Chevalier, you go into Castile, and then you come up into the Kingdom of Poland for the extra health on Cav, and I'm 99% sure that should also technically include the Archer. You've got to be careful because I know over in AOM it doesn't include the Genitua or the Terma. So if we take that, they're on 100. That should take them up to 110. Indeed it does. Okay, so it does affect them. So you could go for like a full cavalry unique composition where you've got your Chevaliers and you've got your Schlacher. Apologies, I'm butchering that. I know I am. And you've also got your Genitua, and these are all your unique units. And at the same time, you know, that you're getting all of those extra bonuses on top of it as well. So you could go for like a full cavalry composition, almost reminiscent of the Sioux in Age of Empires 3. They have the ability to do that, where they just go full cavalry and could still beat you, even if you tried to counter them with like spearmen and stuff like that. So that's definitely one of the ways that you could do it. So let's talk about the third option that I sort of envision at the moment. And obviously that's around the Knights Hospitaller. And I think the strength here with them is the more defensive style of play. So one of the things that we talked about earlier on is once you've aged up, so we'll go through with them and we'll grab our cheat in a jiffy. So once you've aged up with them, you're going to start, your Pilgrims are going to start making their way out across the map. And the way that I kind of suspect that this is going to play is that when it comes to playing as the Knights Templar, obviously you're going to want to be defensive with regard to your protection. But I do think they're going to be quite an aggressive civilization. So I don't know if this unit necessarily combos well with that, because when you're playing as aggressive, you want to be diving, right? You don't want to be holding back. You want to be really pushing in. And this isn't a unit that is particularly strong when it comes to that kind of thing. But what they are very good at doing is playing defensively. So as an example, if we need to bring a villager out to do this, but one of the things that I sort of envision happening is that if you were going to play a defensive style, you could look to put your fortress out here. And normally, if we think about a fortress, let's just put it along here, this route here. We'll call this our sacred site. So when you're playing around a fortress, right, your enemy is going to try and push in here. They're going to try and take out your army. Maybe they want to take out the fortress if they think that they can. And one of the things that is inevitably going to happen in the games that you play with a defensive civilization is people are going to realize they bit off more than they could chew. They're going to come in, they're going to attack, and then they're going to go, oh, there's too much, we're going to fall back. And that's a really good thing for you, because now it means that all of your troops that were on half HP or quarter HP, you've now got time to just sit back and heal them up. Because I think, realistically, you're probably not going to be doing a whole lot of healing with this unit when you're actually in fights. I think that the majority of this unit is just going to be fighting, and then once the fight is finished, then 100% you can look to get the heal coming through. But for the duration of the fights, it's all going to be that. So this kind of gives you that time to do that. On top of that, you're able to stack bonuses. Like if you're playing defensive, if you're hypothetically, I mean, I guess technically there's a world where you could have like a whole bunch of fortresses that are just lining up all the way to the sacred site. We do have a villager that's out here somewhere. Let's go ahead and grab them, bring them out over here. We've got ourselves a couple of wolves. Let's go ahead and fix that up. So if you had a whole bunch of fortresses along your route, like this, it would basically mean that your enemy would have a very difficult... Oh, we can see there it is. It popped up the run. Your enemy would have a very difficult time of fighting underneath these, just simply because of all the bonuses that you're getting. Not only are you getting that extra attack range, so your archers are getting increased range, but you're also getting that +1 armor as well for all of these. Now, incredibly expensive. Probably not going to happen. But that's generally the idea, is that if you can get defensive structures on here, you're going to be able to create a bastion where your enemy can really not push into. And if they do push into it, you're going to be able to punish them. And because they can't push into it, it essentially means that you get to have your pilgrims for free, basically. You know, the enemy can't really do anything about it, so you're free to do whatever you want. In addition to that. So I think that playing into the Knights Hospitaller is definitely more of a defensive focus. We haven't really talked too much about the bonuses and comboing the bonuses, but with the Knights Hospitaller, you'd probably want to focus on something like Pilgrims generating gold, just simply because if you're going to be playing defensively, there's a good chance you're going to have more Pilgrims, and with more Pilgrims, you've got more gold that is being generated. On top of that, you could look to try and combine it with the Kingdom of Castile, which is units near sacred sites gain 20% damage and regenerate health, which we'll take for the moment just because I want to demonstrate how large this radius actually is. It's quite a big radius as well, so we'll bring 2 units out here and see if we can find the edge of the sacred site. And this is another one of those bonuses that really promotes defending rather than offending or attacking. So here you can see this unit doesn't have it, whereas this unit does. Let's see if we can find the line. There it is, somewhere in this region. So here you've got, oh, there we go. We've got units that have got it, so there you go. So that's the, essentially just imagine like a ring around the sacred site. That is what you're dealing with. That's the edge of it right there. And so it's a good radius that is coming through. And now that means that if you've got a keep or a fortress on a sacred site, that if you're defending in this pocket, not only are you now getting extra armor, not only are you getting extra range, you're also getting extra damage. So there is a real defensive build-up that can be occurring when you consider all these factors. So there's definitely an enjoyable component. I think that this civilization is going to be very much dependent on how you want to play it as a player, which is really cool. I do like that a lot. It gives you flexibility. You're not pigeonholed into playing a specific way. I mean, obviously, you're forced into playing the mechanics of the civilization in the sense that you're going to be forced to defend pilgrims. But at the same time, it's like, you know, well, you're forced to age up, right? Like, it's just one of those things, right? Like, if you don't like it, just don't play the Civ. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, like, if you look at the Delhi Sultanate, if you look at the Holy Roman Empire, it feels like there's really only one way to play those civilizations. And I think with the Knights Templar, there's going to be multiple ways that you can play or this civilization. So that is essentially it when it comes to that. So now let's talk a little bit about synergies with regard to bonuses. So we've obviously covered the bonuses, the fact that you've got defensive bonuses that have come through. If we take a look in the Imperial Age, there's a couple more bonuses that are in here. So we can pair up those earlier bonuses and look to try and pair them up with our later age bonuses. We've already talked about stacking up a whole bunch of cavalry together and then grabbing that health bonus. It obviously gives you a charge bonus for the cavalry as well, but there's another one that is that we haven't really talked about just yet, which I do like the idea of. So basically what you will do is you would start off with the French. So we'd start off with the Kingdom of France. That's going to reduce our unit cost by 5%, which doesn't seem like a lot, except for the fact that some units are going to cost a lot more gold than others. So as an example here, we've got a gold unit that costs 100 gold. So that means that it's going to be reduced down. Instead of 100 gold, it's now at 95 gold. And there is another unit that costs only gold as well, 120 gold. And that, of course, is going to come down even further. So let's go ahead and grab our archery or our barracks. And that's going to mean that we're now paying 114. It's a small little detail, and I don't think in the big picture it really changes too much. But it's one of those things where it's like, we do want to try and be playing into these bonuses as much as we can, within reason. when it comes to what I think or what I suspect is going to be the strongest combination going forward, I do think it's going to be the Kingdom of France. For a feudal start, I think almost always it makes the most sense to go for the Kingdom of France, just because you do have that higher flexibility with or higher mobility. Let's go with that. So I think Kingdom of France is going to make the most sense. I think the weakest is probably going to be the Knights Hospitaller, which is quite interesting considering they do get a pretty strong bonus here. The extra 15% military units production speed, it's not, like, it's noticeable, but it's really not the main thing. The main thing that you're going for here is the units. I do think the Principality of Antioch will be quite good as well. There's definitely some nice combos that you can get going with this bonus. When it comes to the Sergeant, I think the Cat is still... let's just say, I'm still undecided on how strong this unit will actually be. And I think the other thing to note is that, I mean, once we've got pro games that are coming through and tens of thousands of ladder games, and once everyone's sort of feeling it out, maybe new strategies will come to light. But at this stage, my initial perception is that out of these three units, this one here is probably going to be the best, just on the basis of mobility. So if we know that we're going to be picking the Kingdom of France the majority of the time, where do we go from here? Well, I think that's largely going to be on playstyle. And I will also say Kingdom of France is also a playstyle choice. Maybe you favor a more mobile focus on your units, so maybe that makes sense. Whereas if you're playing a more defensive style, obviously Knights Hospitaller is going to make so much more sense for you. So there's that factor as well to consider. But generally, I think that it's going to make the most sense to go into the Kingdom of France. And then from here, I think that a really good combo with this is going to be the Angevin Empire. Not so much because of the bonus that it gives, but just rather the unit. So I'm a big fan of the Heavy Spearmen. I think this is a really good unit. I'm very scared for it from a balance perspective, because I know that my army is going to consist of me literally just spamming out 1,000 of these pointy boys and just like a couple of mangoes and just laughing at anybody who dare stand in my way. Because, like, at the end of the day, these are incredibly powerful units. If we think about, like, what's the primary weakness of a men-at-arms? If you think about it, like, what's the primary weakness? It's a knight, it's a crossbow. Okay, well, good news. Well, knights are no longer a problem, and crossbows, well, we can deal with those as well. There are still other things to consider, like maybe the Springle could be a big problem for this, but I think generally, like, one of the strategies, not strategies, but one of the tactics we see players do is they make a lot of spearmen. And I think the fact that you've got a stronger spearman now is incredibly powerful. So I think this is also going to be quite good. Then finally, for the Imperial Age, I don't think you can really go past the Teutonic Order. The extra 2 melee armor for all your gold units, especially when we consider the fact that you've got, say, all of these spearmen that are out, and then all of a sudden you're now going to get an extra 2 armor on them. So if we now look at in the Imperial Age, you're talking about units that have got just a ridiculous amount of armor. But on top of that, you're now able to combo that with your Teutonic Knights, and the Teutonic Knights are going to be reducing armor down from the enemy by 2. So now you've got extra armor, you're deducting armor off the enemy, and of course you've got a whole bunch of spears that are only really countered by the crossbow. It feels like it's one of those things where it's a matter of time before you overrun the enemy. And this is one of the issues that you have with, like, any kind of crossbow versus men-at-arms battle, is that in low numbers, the men-at-arms will beat the crossbow. If it's like 3 men-at-arms against 3 crossbows, the men-at-arms will beat them, just simply because it takes too long for the crossbows to kill the men-at-arms, and the crossbows just have to kite and kite and kite and kite, and the men-at-arm player will be winning in the sense that they will have more APM freed up for the time that it takes to actually kill those men-at-arms. Then it sorts to even out, not even out, but then it goes in favor of the crossbows. Once they can get to the point where you're one-shotting men-at-arms, then it becomes a lot easier to manage. And then it goes the other way once the number of units really start to increase. So once you're up to like 50 or 60 men-at-arms, it becomes very difficult to deal with that, even if you've got 50 or 60 crossbows or hand cannoneers, just mainly because it's going to require you so much more effort to kill those than it is for the men-at-arm player. And that's what's going to happen, I suspect, with the spearmen, in that you're going to be able to take spearmen and you're going to have the brunt of it will be going down mid, and then you're going to have 4 off to this side, 3 off to this side, 2 off to that side, and in the event you go and send off a couple of units to go deal with these spearmen, the bad news is they do not mess around. These are incredibly powerful units, so they're going to be strong at raiding, strong at just being annoying all the time. They're going to be great in heads-up battle. I think it's going to be probably one of the best units when it comes to this civilization. But I'm curious what your thoughts are. Have I missed anything? Have I missed the mark? And if I have, what would you change about what I've said, or at least the advice? If you've got any tips, make sure you leave them down below. But other than that, we'll leave it here for the theory crafting video for the Knights Templar. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, a bit more relaxed, a bit more chilled out, and we'll catch you in the next one.